I had to make a choice, stand by my son or support my daughter-in-law. But when I chose the latter, things went terribly wrong. Here's what happened.
Quick backstory. After graduating high school, my son moved 3 states away for college. At 19, he married a girl he met. I tried convincing him to wait because I personally felt he was too immature. They both dropped out and moved back here to his hometown. At 20, they had their first child, a beautiful little girl. 16 months later, my DIL gave birth to their second child, a little boy. After the first baby, my wife and I noticed our DIL wasn't happy. We both thought it was PPD related. Just after the second arrived, my son and his wife separated. She would bring the kids over for a visit. It was then she began unloading on us. I know there's 2 sides to every story, but considering I know my son, I believed her. I sat my son down numerous times to speak with him regarding his marriage. He refused to take responsibility, blamed her for everything even when I directly pointed out where he was the sole problem. They got into counseling. For a year, things were okay on the surface. Our DIL filed for divorce. My son 3 days later was on Facebook announcing his new girlfriend. A month later, they were engaged. My son had forced his then-wife to become a permanent SAHM at the birth of their first child. She, of course, had no other family or friends here. She knew no one aside from us. She had nowhere to go with 2 small children. Unbeknownst to our son, my wife and I helped her financially and got her an apartment. Before the divorce was even finalized, we received a wedding invitation. I made it clear to my son I would not be attending, and they would not have my blessing. His mother told him she would see to it that I would attend. I stayed consistent in my decision. I also asked him not to bring his fiancée around our house out of respect for the mother of his children. The wedding happened on Feb 11. The night before, my wife gave me the finial push. I did not attend. Our daughter also did not attend for the same reasons. My wife picked up our grandkids, got them dressed, and attended the wedding. My daughter and I decided to spend the evening with his ex. I couldn't imagine her sitting alone while her kids attended their father's wedding. She was taken aback that I didn't end up attending his wedding. We took her out to distract her mind. I just wanted her to know she'll always be considered family to us. My daughter also made a joke they can drop the in-law status and just be sisters now. She was very tearfully grateful. I realized just how badly she needed our support, and specifically on that night. The next morning, my son called to tell me how much of a horrible father I am for not attending his wedding. Few days later, he caught wind that I spent the wedding evening with his ex. He said that was the ultimate form of betrayal, and further, myself and his sister would have to earn a relationship with him on his terms only. Update 1. So, after the wedding and all that drama, things didn't calm down. If anything, they got messier. My son didn't reach out for a while after calling me a horrible father. My wife kept saying I should apologize to make peace, but I wasn't about to grovel when I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I stuck to my boundaries, which apparently made me the villain in my son's story. He's always been stubborn, so I wasn't shocked. In the meantime, my ex-deal was actually doing great. It was like she was a completely different person. She started taking the kids to the park more often, got into a little mom group, and even started volunteering at their preschool. You could see how much happier she was, even though she was juggling a lot. My daughter and I were helping with babysitting whenever we could, which seemed to take a load off her shoulders. Then, out of nowhere, my wife brought up an idea that threw me off. She suggested inviting my son and his new wife over for dinner. She thought it might help rebuild bridges. I was completely against it. First, I didn't trust his new wife, especially after how fast everything moved with their relationship. Second, I didn't want to reward my son's behavior by acting like everything was fine. My wife argued that we couldn't just ignore the situation forever, but I told her we could certainly try. Things hit a boiling point when my son decided to post on Facebook again, as if airing family drama publicly is his favorite hobby. This time he wrote a long post about how family loyalty is dead, and how parents owe their kids unconditional support no matter what. He didn't name names, but it was obvious he was talking about me. He even included a passive-aggressive jab about how he was grateful for the family members who chose love over judgment, which was clearly aimed at my wife for attending the wedding. I ignored it because I wasn't about to get into a Facebook argument, but my daughter couldn't hold back. She commented, "Respect is earned, not demanded. Maybe focus on your kids instead of your status updates." It was brutal, but honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. My son deleted her comment and then blocked both of us. A few weeks later, we got some unexpected news. My ex-DIL called us, sounding completely overwhelmed. She said my son hadn't been showing up for his scheduled visits with the kids. He would cancel last minute or just not show up at all. Apparently, his new wife had been complaining that the kids were too much to handle and were interfering with their life. Hearing that made my blood boil. I tried to keep calm while I reassured my ex-DIL that we'd do whatever we could to help. What really broke my heart was when my granddaughter started noticing her dad's absence. One day, while I was babysitting, she asked me why her dad didn't want to see her anymore. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that her dad is too caught up in his own world to prioritize her? I told her that her dad loved her very much and was just busy right now, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Meanwhile, my son and his wife announced they were expecting a baby. My wife found out through Facebook, not from him directly, which was just another slap in the face. She was thrilled about the news, though, and started talking about how we needed to put the past behind us because a new baby means a new beginning. I didn't see it that way. To me, it felt like my son was doubling down on his poor decisions without considering the consequences. The situation escalated when my son finally reached out to me directly. He called and started off by saying he wanted to clear the air, but it quickly turned into him listing all the ways I'd failed him as a father. He blamed me for choosing sides and said I was the reason his ex-wife was acting entitled. I told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions instead of blaming everyone else. That didn't go over well. He accused me of turning his kids against him, which is ridiculous because I've never said a bad word about him to them. After that, he stopped talking to me altogether. My wife kept in touch with him and would give me updates here and there, but I didn't reach out. I felt like any attempt to mend things would just turn into another argument. Then came the real twist. My ex-DIL told me she'd started dating someone new. His name is Chris, and from what I've seen, he's a solid guy. He's a paramedic and has a really calm, grounded vibe. He's been spending time with the kids and they seem to like him. My granddaughter even told me, "Chris makes mommy happy." Hearing that made me realize how far my ex-DIL had come. She was finally building a life for herself and her kids without relying on my son. Things took a surprising turn when my son's new wife reached out to my ex-DIL directly. She sent a long, nasty text accusing her of poisoning the kids against their dad. She said it was unfair that the kids were spending time with Chris and not bonding with their real family. My ex-DIL showed me the messages and I was furious. I told her she had every right to set boundaries and that she didn't owe them anything. Not long after that, my son showed up at my house unannounced. He said he wanted to talk, but it quickly became clear he was only there to vent. He complained about how hard things had been with his new wife and how he felt left out of his kids' lives. I told him he needed to step up and take responsibility if he wanted to be a part of their lives. He didn't take that well. He said I was too focused on his ex-wife and that I needed to back off. Here's the kicker. A few days later, my son's new wife posted on Facebook about how toxic in-laws were ruining their marriage. She didn't name names, but it was obvious who she was talking about. My wife was devastated, and even I felt hurt, but honestly, I wasn't surprised. At this point, it feels like my son and his wife are more focused on playing the victim than actually fixing their lives. On the flip side, my ex-DIL is thriving. She's got a great support system, a good job, and a loving partner. My grandkids are happy and well cared for, which is all I could ever ask for. As for my son, I still hope he'll turn things around, but I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focusing on being the best grandparent I can be and supporting the people who actually want to be in my life. Update 2. All right, here's where everything lands. Things got more complicated before they even had a chance to settle. After my son's dramatic exit from my house, I decided I wasn't going to chase him anymore. I was tired of being the bad guy in his narrative. I focused on my grandkids, my ex-DIL, and supporting them however I could. My daughter stayed on the same page with me, and while my wife tried to keep a line of communication open with my son, even she started to feel like it was a lost cause. Then the unexpected happened. My son's new wife, who I'll call M, reached out to my wife. She didn't call or text. She wrote an email of all things. It was long, overly formal, and clearly written to make her look like the victim. She said she was struggling with being a stepmom, that she felt isolated from the family, and that my ex-DIL was interfering in their lives. She even suggested we were enabling my ex-DIL by helping her with the kids, which she claimed was keeping my son from building a new family with her. My wife showed me the email and I was livid. First of all, my ex-DIL isn't interfering in anything. She's just raising her kids and doing a damn good job at it. Second, the idea that helping my grandkids is somehow wrong. That's where I draw the line. I told my wife not to respond because I didn't see the point. M doesn't seem like someone who's open to reason. But of course, M wasn't done. A few days later, she showed up at my house, uninvited. My wife let her in, and I decided to hear her out, mostly because I was curious about what she wanted. She started by saying she wanted to clear the air. She went on about how my ex-DIL was making things difficult for her and my son, how the kids were confused about who their family was, and how she felt like my loyalty was misplaced. I stopped her right there. I told her my loyalty is, and always will be, to my grandkids. I don't care about anyone's feelings if the kids aren't being treated right. She didn't like that answer. She got defensive and accused me of favoritism. That's when I told her flat out, this isn't about sides. It's about doing what's best for those kids. If you and my son want to be part of their lives, you need to step up and show them that you care, not just talk about it. She stormed out, and I thought that was the end of it, but no. The next thing I know, my son is calling me, furious. He said I disrespected his wife, and that if I didn't apologize, I'd lose him for good. I told him I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for my grandkids. That's when he said something that floored me. He told me that M wanted to file for full custody of my grandkids. He claimed it was for their own good, so they could be in a stable household. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him if he seriously thought taking the kids away from their mother was a good idea. He doubled down, saying that M could be a better influence on them. I didn't hold back. I told him he was delusional if he thought any judge would grant them custody when he barely spends time with his kids as it is. I also told him that if he went through with this, he'd lose more than just me. He'd lose his kids' trust forever. He hung up on me and I haven't heard from him since. My ex-DIL, meanwhile, handled the situation like a champ. She got a lawyer immediately and started documenting everything. Missed visits, nasty messages, everything. She told me she wasn't scared because she knew the court would see through whatever my son and M were trying to pull. She was more upset for the kids, who would inevitably get caught in the middle of this mess. Things came to a head a couple of weeks later. My son and M actually filed for some kind of temporary custody hearing. Their argument, that my ex-DIL was unstable, and that the kids would be better off with them. It was laughable but also terrifying because it showed just how far they were willing to go. At the hearing, it became clear they didn't have a case. My ex-DL's lawyer tore their arguments apart, pointing out that my son hadn't been consistent with visitation and that M had no legal standing as a step-parent. The judge dismissed their request and even scolded my son for wasting the court's time. After the hearing, my ex-DIL thanked me for standing by her, but I told her she didn't need to thank me. Supporting her and the kids has never been a question for me. She's family, plain and simple. Now here's where things stand. My son hasn't reached out since the hearing. M blocked my wife and me on all social media, which honestly feels like a blessing. My wife is still upset, but even she's starting to see that we can't fix this. My daughter refuses to have anything to do with my son, saying he needs to wake up and grow up before she'll even consider speaking to him again. As for my ex-DIL, she's thriving. She and Chris got engaged a few months after the hearing, and they're planning a small wedding for next year. The kids adore him, and he's been a consistent positive presence in their lives. My granddaughter even called him Daddy Chris the other day, and while that hit me hard, I can't deny that he's earned it. I still think about my son and wonder if there's any hope for reconciliation. Deep down, I want to believe he can change, but I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focusing on what matters: my grandkids, my daughter, and supporting the family that actually wants to be in my life. It's not the ending I would have chosen, but it's the one we've got. And honestly, I'm okay with that.